Today we are looking at a case from the second part of the 19th century, so sit back as we go to France. Marie Boye was born in 1859 in Montpellier, a city in southern France that during the 19th century was very important for the production of wine, mainly due to its sunny climate and its position just 10 kilometers from the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. It had also become an established trading route between Spain, Italy, Africa and Northern Europe. There were many wealthy residents, some of whom had relocated to Montpellier in the 1850s, as due to the railways and improved communication links, the city began a period of expansion and urban renovation. One of the wealthy residents was named Monsieur Boye, a hard-working gentleman who, although not part of the social elite, worked hard as a merchant and was making enough money to live a comfortable life. He employed a domestic servant named Mademoiselle Marie Salat. She was very attractive and soon became his mistress. In 1859 they married, and a few months later she gave birth to a daughter, the couple's only child, who they named Marie. Life continued to be good for the family. However, Monsieur Boye suffered from ill health, so it was decided to send young Marie to study in a convent in Marseille. This very much suited her mother, as she did not possess great maternal instincts and was pleased that her daughter was out of the way. As Monsieur Boye's condition worsened, he became confined to his bed and was suffering terribly from rheumatic gout. Although his wife nursed him, his condition meant that she was able to see other men and started a relationship with a young bookseller's assistant named Léon Vitelli. He was a young man of just 21 years of age. Monsieur Boye remained ignorant of her infidelity even after she introduced him to her young lover, telling her husband that he was a relative who was going to help put all of their finances in order. In the May of 1874, Monsieur Boye's condition became so bad that doctors informed him that he did not have long left to live. He longed to see his daughter, who by now was 15 years old, but she was in a convent 170 kilometers away in the city of Marseille. One of Monsieur Boye's friends offered to go and fetch her, but when he arrived at the convent, he was told that Marie had become greatly attracted by the prospect of a religious life, and the Mother Superior informed the gentleman that the young girl had expressed her desire to one day take her vows. Marie was informed of her father's dying state and of his wish to see her for one last time. Marie, however, did not want to leave the convent. She said that if she was able to save her father's life, she would go, but as this was not possible, instead she would stay and pray for him. Before the friend had arrived back in Montpellier, Monsieur Boye died. He was 46 years old. In his will, he had left almost the whole of his fortune, which amounted to about 100,000 francs, to his daughter. He appointed her mother, Madame Boye, who was by now 40 years old, as her legal guardian, with the right to the enjoyment of the income of capital until Marie should come of age. Marie's mother had never really taken her religious devotion very seriously, but now that the greater part of her household's estate had been left to Marie, she realized that should her daughter persist in her intention of taking her religious vows, in a few years, the fortune would pass into the hands of the sisterhood. Without delay, Madame Boye withdrew Marie from the convent. In 1875, Marie celebrated her 16th birthday. She had grown into an attractive young lady, and despite her previous reluctance to come home, she now seemed to be enjoying her new life. She would go to the shops or to the theatre and was always noticed by polite young men who would often lift their hat as she passed. She would then acknowledge them with a smile. Her beauty had also been noticed by Léon Vitelli, her mother's young lover. Following her husband's death, Madame Boye had yielded herself completely to his influence. She had given him money so he could purchase a business of his own, and he was now an independent second-hand bookseller. The trade, however, also came with a reputation, as many second-hand booksellers combined their profession with money lending and the sale of improper books and photographs. For Léon, the fact that young Marie had returned from the convent was significant. She was still a teenager and more attractive than her mother, and in a few years, the whole of her father's fortune would be hers. He paid her particular attention and tried to slowly win her affections. However, this did not go unnoticed by Madame Boye, so she sent Marie to a convent school in Lyon to complete her education. But she was unaware. Her daughter had already arranged to write to Leon while she was away, and Marie was unaware that her mother was conducting a relationship with him. In the summer of 1875, Madame Boye decided to spend the summer in a small country house in a village close to Montpellier. Here she lived with her young lover. In August, Marie came back from school and decided that she would not return. That winter, her mother gave up the country house, and they all went back to live in the city. By now, Marie had discovered that her mother was having a relationship with Leon, something which she very much disapproved of. In the January of 1876, a theft occurred in the household, which obliged Madame Boye to inform the police. She had proved to be incompetent in the management of her money, and instead of putting it in the bank, she kept much of it in the house. She would hide away cash and bonds in places such as books and dresses, and even in a soup tureen. One of her most ingenious hiding places was behind a portrait of her late husband. Here she concealed some bonds in landed security. These amounted to about 11,000 francs, but they had now disappeared. The police took the matter seriously and started to investigate the crime. But just 3 days later, Madame Boye withdrew her request to have them investigate it, and no more was heard of the matter. Only Leon and Marie could have known where she had hidden the bonds, and Madame Boye suspected that Leon had probably stolen them. Later that year, Leon announced that he was going to live in Paris, but he continued to write to Marie. To Madame Boye, life without her young lover seemed quite dull. She was not aware that her daughter was also involved in a relationship with a young man, and thought that it was time to find her a suitable husband. She decided that she would leave Montpellier and go to live in Marseille. Marseille was the second biggest city in France and sat on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Marie was happy to go and live in a larger, more cosmopolitan place. They arrived on the 6th of October 1876, and Madame Boye bought 2 shops adjoining one another in the Rue de la République. One was a cheese shop, the other a milliner's shop. However, she paid a price considerably higher than their true value. She looked after the cheese shop, while her daughter presided over the milliner's shop. They were next door to one another. Behind the milliner's was a drawing room, behind the cheese shop a kitchen. These 2 rooms were adjoined by another room. In the kitchen was a trapdoor leading to a cellar. There was a bedroom in the adjoining house, which Marie shared with her mother. Leon thought that the idea of his mistress and her daughter running 2 businesses would prove to be a poor investment. He could see that Madame Boye may lose the majority of Marie's inheritance before she came of age, and decided that he needed to somehow take full control of Madame Boye's affairs. He told her that he would come to Marseille in the new year of 1877, and as he did not want to cause any gossip or scandal, it was decided that he should pass as her nephew and as Marie's cousin. He arrived in Marseille on the 1st of January, and as the weeks passed, Marie started to feel hatred towards her mother, who insisted on showing Leon great affection and seemed to parade him in front of her. Leon was a cunning young man. He persuaded Madame Boye to give him power of attorney over her affairs. As the businesses were not successful, he immediately set about trying to sell them. He told Marie his plans. She seemed to have grown very fond of him indeed. He said that once he had sold the 2 shops, they would have the money to go away and begin a new life together. They were happy when Madame Boye fell ill and she was confined to her bed. This meant that Marie and Leon could spend even more time together, and they started to wish that her illness could be more serious. Madame Boye had become aware that there was some sort of strange secret relationship going on between her lover and her daughter, and this brought her hours of torment. She even wondered if they were perhaps trying to poison her. She also realized that she had been wrong to have got involved with Leon, and decided that when she was well, she would go to Mass and make atonement for her sin. She would recover her power of attorney, get rid of Leon for good, and send her daughter back to a convent. But this would prove to be somewhat more difficult than she had imagined. Try as she might, Leon had found it impossible to sell the shops at anything but a worthless figure. He had no money of his own with which to take Marie away, and he knew that Madame Boye's attitude towards him had changed. As soon as she recovered sufficiently to leave her bed, she turned on her former lover. She denounced his treachery, accused him of robbing and swindling her, and told him to leave. But this would mean that Marie too would lose the man she loved. Leon told Marie but she would have to murder her mother, reminding her as to what type of mother she had been to her. On the morning of Monday the 19th of March 1877, Madame Boye rose early to go to Mass. Before she went out, she reminded Leon that this was his last day in her service and that when she returned, she would expect to find him gone. It was just after 7 when she left the house. Leon and Marie knew that if they were going to kill Madame Boye, it would have to be done that day. So before she was due to return at 1 p.m, Leon sent the shop boy out on an errand. When Madame Boye came back, she expressed her astonishment and displeasure that Leon was still there. She made herself clear in the morning that he should be gone. She told him to go and said that if he did not, she would send for the police. Madame Boye then went to the sitting room to rest. Leon entered the room and after a few heated words, he struck her a violent blow on the chest. Madame Boye called for her daughter to come and assist. Marie, however, only tried to drown out her mother's cries by banging the doors and opening and shutting drawers. Leon was now trying to strangle Madame Boye and called for Marie to close the shop and make sure that the doors were shut. To do this, Marie had to pass through the sitting room, where she saw Leon unsuccessfully trying to strangle her mother. After checking the doors were closed, she fetched a large cheese knife and returned to the sitting room. She then started kicking and beating her mother, and when she sank back into the sofa, Leon stabbed her and the poor lady died. But now they had to dispose of her body. The shop boy would soon be returning, and they could not risk him finding out what they had done. They took the body into a cellar, and Marie washed the floor of the sitting room. When the shop boy came back, he got on with his duties, but after a while, he inquired as to the whereabouts of Madame Boye. Leon told him that she was out, as she was preparing to return to Montpellier that evening. He added that he was going to go to the train station with her, as she thought that he would also go to Montpellier, but he planned to help her on the train. And then, at the last moment, just as the train was starting to pull out of the station, he would jump off and she would go back to Montpellier alone. The shop boy found this idea somewhat amusing. At 7 o'clock he left, and Leon and Marie were alone. They were still wondering how to dispose of the body. Leon decided that it would be easy to bury it under the soil in the cellar, after which he and Marie would then sell the business for whatever they could and go to Brussels. However, when he started to dig in the cellar, he discovered that the floor was just rock, so he was unable to bury Madame Boye there. He then concluded that the best option would be to throw the body into the sea, but getting it there would be difficult. So he thought that he and Marie would have to dismember it. They would also have to disfigure the face to render it unrecognizable. In the presence of Marie, Leon went about dismembering and disfiguring the body, and at just before midnight, they went together to throw the body parts into the sea. They arrived at the harbour, but it was quite busy, so they went home and thought that the next day they would travel outside the city to dispose of Madame Boye. The following morning, they woke up early. Marie started to count the money that her mother had hidden around the house and wondered how much her jewellery may be worth, but she did not see that a curious neighbour was peering through the keyhole, looking at what she was doing. When the shop boy arrived, he asked Leon how the trick went that he played on Madame Boye. When he jumped off the train, Leon said that it went just as he had planned. However, unbeknown to Leon, the shop boy had in fact gone to the station the previous evening, as he wanted to see the whole event unfold, but he had not seen either Leon or the mistress. The shop boy had been working with Madame Boye, her daughter, and Leon for long enough to know that there had been tension between them. He started to suspect that something quite sinister may have occurred. That evening, after the shops had closed, instead of going home, he waited nearby to see if anything strange occurred. Just as it started to get dark, he saw Leon and Marie leave the house. They were pushing a handcart, which had upon it 2 large parcels. The shop boy followed them for a short distance, but stopped when they left the city and went into the country. Leon and Marie were hoping to find some deserted spot along the coast where they may conceal the evidence of their crime. They were stopped by a customs house officer who asked them what they had in the handcarts. Leon replied that it was just travellers' luggage, and the officer let them pass. Soon after, afraid to risk another such experience, they threw the parcels into a ditch, covered them with stones and sand, and hurried home. The following day, the inquisitive neighbour who had seen the shop boy hiding outside the couple's two shops the previous evening, asked him what he had seen. When the shop boy told him, they decided that something strange had happened, and as Madame Boye had not been seen, they went to the police and told them of their concerns. At the same time, the police had been informed that a dismembered body had been discovered in a ditch a short distance outside Marseille. An officer escorted the boy to the city morgue, and he confirmed that the dress that had been found with the body had belonged to his mistress, Madame Boye. The police went straight to the shops in the Rue de la République, where they arrested Leon and Marie. They denied all knowledge of the crime and said that Marie's mother had gone to Montpellier. However, it was not long before they confessed their guilt. They were both charged with murder. Their trial began on the 2nd of July 1877, but not in Marseille. Instead, it took place in the nearby city of Aix-en-Provence. The trial was a sensation, and both the press and the public seemed fascinated with the love triangle that had ended up in the murder of Madame Boye. The press described Leon as insignificant in appearance, thin and pale. They were far more generous in their description of Marie, who they wrote was a pretty young lady with olive skin, dainty and elegant, but with a cold expression. Throughout the trial, she seemed to be greatly under the influence of Leon, so much so that when she took the stand, the judge sent him out of court. At the end of the trial, Leon Vitali was found guilty and sentenced to death, while due to the extenuating circumstances, Marie was sentenced to penal servitude for life. On the 17th of August 1877, Leon was executed by guillotine. Marie, however, proved to be a model prisoner, and due to this, she was released 15 years later, in 1892. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case.